I'm happy to share a podium with the crime guys. Thanks for being here. I'm going to read from my book that came out earlier this year called The Sins of Brother Curtis, which is a true life legal thriller about a child sex abuse case against the Mormon Church that actually became an epic constitutional fight over freedom of religion. Within that is kind of the tale also of a serial pedophile who manipulated his way through Mormon communities across the country. So the passage that I'm going to read talks about tells the story of a group of kids in the mid-70s in a particular low-income neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, and how they landed in the path of the predator. The basketball hoop in front of Billy Lloyd's house was the epicenter of the southeast Portland neighborhood, where Billy and Manny Saban and Bobby Goodall and their various siblings spent much of the second half of the 1970s. No one remembers how it came to be there, but it remains there today, like a monument to lost boyhood. Its chain metal net hanging scrappily to the hoop on a pole stuck firmly into the concrete. Manny lived around the corner toward the Dairy Queen on Duke Street. Bobby lived a block or so from there. His backyard was connected to Billy's by an unpaved alleyway, underneath two big trees that conspired to create an umbrella of foliage, which is how they came to be best friends just before the second grade. Kids gravitated towards each other in the neighborhood without need for formal structure or organizing. Play was instinctual. If there was a ball, it was tossed. When enough boys gathered, a game started. On most days, the boys gathered at the hoop to shoot baskets and toss footballs across the street in the field that was technically a park, though the weeds had long ago swallowed up everything except an aging metal roundabout and the skeleton of a swing set. Things were like that here where Portland meets a suburb called Milwaukee. Officially, this was the edge of the Lentz neighborhood, a disregarded part of Portland that the city hadn't annexed yet. Unofficially, and as far as anyone around here was concerned, the neighborhood was Felony Flats, a name bestowed by police officers some years earlier because of the concentration of criminals among the citizenry. Few of the mothers worked regularly or more than part-time. Most were overwhelmed by too many children, a life of disappointment, and, in many cases, bad men. They dulled the pain of broken promises and routine domestic violence with alcohol and drugs. Husbands and boyfriends came and went. Fathers were significantly absent. Sometimes it was better for a kid to be gone than get caught up in whatever was going on inside the house. Word in the neighborhood was that Billy's father had died on the job some years earlier. None of the kids really knew the details of the story other than he'd been killed at work, which involved doing something on bridge. The late Mr. White had also left behind a mess of kids, 3 boys and 3 girls, more than could easily be managed by their mother. Added to that were some cousins who stayed periodically while their family reorganized. The Lloyd house was considered among the best in the neighborhood, mostly because, despite the usual lack of adult supervision, the oldest teenage girl was usually by default in charge. There was always food. A kid could find loaves of bread, big bags of potato chips, and crates of bottled soda pop in the Lloyd kitchen. Bobby shared a house across the alley with his older brother, older and younger sisters, their mother, her boyfriend, and sometimes his son, who was a few years younger and thus often the unwitting victim of an array of pranks. Bobby's brother Jimmy, older by about 3 years, often stayed with their father in Yakima, Washington, but he was well known in the neighborhood. Jimmy enjoyed a certain status as one of the oldest boys in the immediate vicinity and therefore the first to get into significant trouble, his palpable anger having landed in juvenile detention before he became a teenager. Plus, his sisters and, to some extent, Billy couldn't seem to keep their mouths shut, so Jimmy had plenty of opportunities to fight. Manny was the most recent addition to the boys in Felony Flats. His family had arrived in much the same way as most of their neighbors, having lost everything somewhere else. Manny's given name was Stanley Jr., after the father who had left for another life in another state, but everyone called him Manny. He was 10 years old when he moved into the small blue house with his mother, Raquel, his brother Jeff, who was 2 years younger and Manny's best friend, and their baby sister Rosanna. For practical reasons, Manny's father had taken their 12-year-old sister Janice with him when he moved to Las Vegas. Stanley Sr. had managed to reach middle age without having learned to read or write well enough to function on his own without difficulty. He'd grown up in rural outposts and spent most of his youth working on farms, but that wasn't to say he couldn't earn a living. When he worked, Stanley often made good money, painting big structures like bridges. When he didn't work, he drank, which generally got him in trouble. Stanley Sr. had spent time in prisons up and down the West Coast before he met Raquel, who already had 3 other children from a previous husband. For a boy, no single possession was as important as a bicycle, perpetually tinkered with in yards and garages. A A bike was freedom, the means to exploration, the passage to adventure. A bike could take a kid fishing in the creek beds and to buy candy at the corner store. A bike broke up the emptiness of long, warm days where there was no summer camp or vacation or trip to amusement parks. Bikes also brought religion to felony flats. Young Mormon men wearing suits and ties and crisp white shirts glided through the neighborhood on 10 speeds, inviting people to church. Raquel listened to what they had to say about the Bible and God and a wonderful Mormon community where everyone helped everyone else. It was hard to argue the appeal when you had your hands full of kids and low-paying jobs. Raquel had been raised a Catholic and had taken her children to Mass earlier in their lives, but church-going had turned from sporadic to non-existent here. Raquel was eager for spiritual comfort, though, and she invited the young Mormons inside. Both of the missionaries, one short and one tall, had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were young, clean-cut men who called each other elder. Manny was enraptured by the yarns they told, which he considered on the order of adventure tales. There were stories of how Mormon pioneer Joseph Smith, guided by an angel, found the tablets that ultimately became the Book of Mormon and read them using his special glasses. They talked about Boy Scouts and other activities going on at the church and how there were lots of other kids there. They were selling religion, to be sure, but the truth was these young men brought more in the door than anything else that was going on in the neighborhood. Manny didn't just want to go to church, he secretly wanted to become a missionary, to wear a suit and ride a 10-speed through the city, saving citizens and slaying sin. After a few visits, Raquel packed her kids into their beat-up green Pontiac Bonneville with a white rag top and drove them a mile or two to Linwood Ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for a Sunday service. The church couldn't have been mistaken for anything else. It was housed in a red brick building with a steeple on top, all surrounded by lawn with a wide cement path and 2 short sets of stairs leading into the building where lots of people were milling around. Manny was glad to see that the young missionary men from the adventure stories were there. A man named Brother Hunt, who Raquel had met earlier through a neighbor, greeted the family as they walked up the steps toward the building. Everyone seemed exceedingly friendly, and they wore nice clothes. When the service concluded, a flow of people smiling and shaking hands carried them out of the chapel. Brother Hunt had brought a loud man over to where Manny and Jeff were standing with their mother. He'd been in the service earlier. His robe now gone, the man was dressed in a corny-looking outfit of gray polyester slacks and baby blue jacket with white stitching. The ensemble reminded Manny of something the father on the Brady Bunch would wear, except that this man was considerably older. Manny's eyes locked on the man's large hands, the left one missing the parts of 3 fingers. Brother Hunt introduced him as Brother Curtis and explained that Manny's mother was having a hard time controlling the boys. Manny quickly put together that they were in trouble. The snickering in church, he figured, had sealed their fate. Fear slowly climbed up his insides. The large man was there, it seemed, as part of some plan for their future. Bring them over, he was telling Raquel. There was some talk about other boys and going places, and then Manny heard the words, straighten them out and get them out of your hair, and somehow knew that he was in a mess. Thank you.
Our event for tonight, exactly on time, 8 o'clock. Again, Litquake is free. Everyone who works on Litquake volunteers their time. This was not a paid event. We didn't charge. Litquake didn't charge. So if you feel free, please see Maddie out there and drop a few dollars into the envelope. We're also the only one to serve free wine.
We're occupying Mission Station.
Yeah, it was very